Have you ever heard of water bears or moss piglets? These tiny creatures, officially known as tardigrades, have captured the imaginations of scientists and enthusiasts alike. With their pudgy appearance, clumsy crawling, and near invincibility, tardigrades are unlike any other animals on Earth. Check the description for a document with references for the images and research papers I used if you are interested. Tardigrades belong to the phylum Tardigrada, which includes 1,500 known species. They can survive radiation, extreme temperatures, the vacuum of space, and even being dried out for decades, only to spring back to life. But to truly appreciate how unique they are, we first need to understand where they fit in the animal kingdom. So let's take a step back and explore their broader classification. The kingdom Animalia includes all animals, but we often focus on vertebrates, creatures with backbones, like mammals, birds, and reptiles. However, vertebrates make up just a tiny fraction of all animals. Out of an estimated 1.5 million described animal species, only about 65,000 are vertebrates. Some estimates suggest there may be as many as 7.7 million animals in total, with the vast majority still unknown by science. So, what exactly defines an animal? Animals are multicellular organisms that share several key traits. They consume organic material, require oxygen, have muscle cells, are capable of movement, reproduce sexually, and develop from a cluster of cells called a blastula during embryonic growth. However, near every one of these traits has exceptions. For instance, some animals reproduce asexually, like the cottonmouth snakes, which can undergo parthenogenesis. Even the ability to move isn't universal. Sponges, for example, are completely stationary, while some non-animals, like bacteria, can move. From a phylogenetic perspective, defining animals is easier. They include all organisms more closely related to each other than to members of other kingdoms. However, pinpointing shared characteristics is more challenging due to the incredible diversity of life and the deep evolutionary history that has shaped it. Instead of a strict checklist, it's more accurate to say that an organism with many of these features is likely an animal. As with any scientific field, there is ongoing debate about the evolutionary relationships between different groups of animals. The phylogenetic tree I'll reference is based on the most recent research I could find, proposed by Schultz et al. In 2023. The most basal, that is the earliest branching, lineage of animals is the Ctenophora, commonly known as comb jellies. While they resemble jellyfish, they belong to an entirely separate group. They are particularly notable for being the largest animals known to use cilia, tiny hair-like structures, for locomotion. These creatures can grow up to 1.5 meters or 5 feet long, although most species are much smaller. Despite their striking appearance, comb jellies form a relatively small phylum, with only 186 known species. Next, we have the phylum Prorifera, or the sponges. Some scientists argue that sponges, not comb jellies, represent the most ancient animal lineage. Regardless of their exact placement, sponges are undeniably one of the oldest animal groups. Unlike most animals, they lack tissues and organs, relying instead on filter feeding to obtain nutrients while remaining fixed to the ocean floor. Then there's Placozoa. You may have never heard of these creatures, and if you have seen one, you might not have even recognized it as an animal. Placozoans are free-living marine invertebrates that resemble simple multicellular blobs. They move through the oceans using cilia similar to comb jellies, but remain microscopic in size. The closest relatives to Placozoans are Cnidaria, a group you're probably more familiar with. This phylum includes jellyfish, corals, sea anemones, and their relatives. Cnidarians come in two basic forms: free-swimming, like jellyfish, and stationary, like corals. Some, like corals in the Portuguese man-of-war, form massive colonies, while others are solitary. There are around 11,000 known species in this phylum, making it a major branch of the animal tree of life. That brings us to the final major lineage of animals, and the one you're likely most familiar with, Bilateria. Unlike a single phylum, Bilateria is a clade that includes multiple phyla. Its name comes from a key trait shared by all members, bilateral symmetry. meaning the body can be divided into two identical halves. This clade represents the vast majority of known animal species, over 98%. The most basal bilaterians are Xenocolomorpha, a phylum only formally recognized in 2011. Before that, these animals were considered flatworms. They primarily inhabit marine and brackish waters, with many species found in deep-sea environments near hydrothermal vents. Notably, all species in this group are hermaphrodites. I am grouping Echinodermata and Hemichordata together in this phylogeny, as they are each other's closest relatives. Echinoderms are a group you're likely familiar with, including starfish, brittle stars, sea urchins, sand dollars, sea lilies, and sea cucumbers. Hemichordates, on the other hand, are worm-like animals that typically burrow into the sea floor. The next phylum is Chordata. This includes all vertebrates, fish, amphibians, reptiles, birds, and mammals, as well as some closely related invertebrates, such as the lancelets and tunicates. Next, we have Spiralia, a clade containing multiple phyla. Rather than detailing each one, I'll highlight a few major groups. This diverse lineage includes mollusks like squids, snails, and clams, as well as annelids like earthworms and ragworms. Other, lesser-known groups include flatworms, brachiopods, and bryozoans. However, since none of these are the focus of our discussion today, let's move on to the final major clade. The last major clade we'll explore is Ecdysozoa, which includes many different phyla, one of which contains our long-awaited tardigrades. Animals in this group are defined by their ability to molt or shed their outer layer as they grow. The first divergence within Ecdysozoa leads to three distinct phyla. Loricifera consists of microscopic marine animals living in ocean floor sediments. Only 43 species have been formally described, but researchers have collected over 100 more that await classification. Given their global distribution at all depths and latitudes, many more species likely remain undiscovered. Priapulida, humorously nicknamed penis worms due to their shape, are marine worms that typically burrow in mud. They are highly tolerant of extreme conditions, including low oxygen and high hydrogen sulfide levels. Only 22 species are currently known. Chinorhyncha, or mud dragons, are tiny segmented marine invertebrates. Most species are just 1 mm or 0.039 inches long or smaller. While extinct species once reached 4 cm or 1.6 inches, they remain among the smallest known animals today. Unlike true worms, their body segments increase in number as they age. Moving up the phylogenetic tree, we arrive at two closely related phyla. Nematoda, sometimes known as roundworms or eelworms, is one of the most speciose animal groups. While estimates of the total number of species range widely, from 25,000 to 100 million, the most accepted figure is around 1 million. Nematodes inhabit nearly every environment on Earth, from ocean depths to soil and freshwater ecosystems, thriving in both polar and tropical regions. Nematomorpha, or horsehair worms, have a unique life cycle. Their larvae are parasitic, living inside arthropods like beetles and crustaceans, while the adults are free-living in fresh water. They typically grow up to 10 cm or 3.9 inches long, but some extreme cases can reach 2 meters or 79 inches. With only 350 known species, it's estimated that over 2,000 remain undescribed. Finally, we arrive at the phylum Tardigrada. I realise this has been a long journey through the animal kingdom, but we're almost at our main focus. Before we dive into the fascinating world of tardigrades, let's briefly examine their closest relatives. Onychophora, or the velvet worms, are another phylum sometimes called worms, but they are quite distinct. Unlike traditional worms, velvet worms have soft, elongated bodies with numerous stubby legs, giving them an unusual and unique appearance. Finally, we end this phylogeny with Arthropoda, the largest phylum in the animal kingdom, which contains over 75% of all known animal species. Defined by the chitinous exoskeletons and segmented bodies, this group includes familiar creatures like insects, spiders, centipedes, and crabs. With that lengthy exploration into the various lineages of animals, it is finally time to return to the tardigrades, members of the phylum Tardigrada. As we have just seen, Their closest relatives are the velvet worms and arthropods. The name tardigrade means slow walker, an apt description for these tiny creatures. Also known as water bears or moss piglets, tardigrades have 8 legs and a plump, segmented body. They are an ancient phylum, yet only a few fossils of them exist. They first appeared during the Cambrian period, around 500 million years ago. The only other known fossils are from the Cretaceous period, approximately 100 million years ago, where some have been preserved in amber. Cambrian fossils of tardigrades differ from modern species, as they only had 6 legs and simpler body structures. While tardigrades are microscopic today, evidence suggests they descended from larger ancestors and underwent secondary miniaturization. There are approximately 1,500 known species of tardigrades today, and these are divided into 4 orders. The exact relationship between these orders is still debated, but the most recent classification, conducted in 2018, serves as the basis for this discussion. The first order is Tardigrada. These are marine tardigrades first described in the 1920s. Often transparent or semi-transparent, they are distinctive for their jointed legs, which make them resemble arthropods more than other tardigrades. This feature also affects their movement, as they step in a more defined motion rather than the crawling behavior seen in other tardigrades. Currently, Tardigrada consists of 11 families, but recent research suggests the order may be paraphyletic. This means it does not include all descendants of its most recent common ancestor, requiring further research to clarify the evolutionary relationship. The order most closely related to them is Ecdysozoa. These are another group of marine tardigrades, but their bodies are more elongated and streamlined compared to other tardigrades. They possess complex mouthparts, including barbed buccal spines, which help anchor them to their food source. This adaptation allows them to feed on harder surfaces and a greater variety of substrates than other tardigrades. Next is Apochella. This is the first order of terrestrial tardigrades in the phylogeny, primarily inhabiting mosses and lichens, though they can also be found in freshwater environments. Unlike other tardigrades, Apochella species have much simpler mouthparts, lacking buccal spines or similar structures. This suggests they feed primarily on detritus, bacteria, or small algae, rather than attacking larger microorganisms or plant cells. They also have a significantly reduced buccal tube, the structure that delivers food into the digestive tract, which further supports their diet of easily digestible material. Apochella also have an unusual method of reproduction, as they can produce asexually through parthenogenesis. We will explore this in more detail later, but for now let's move on to the final order of tardigrades, Parachella. Parachella tardigrades tend to have elongated bodies with shorter legs. Their claws are simpler and unbranched, providing less grip and dexterity than other tardigrades. This likely reflects their habitat, moist leaf litter or moss, where strong grip is less necessary. Parachella also have fewer sensory organs than other tardigrades, often lacking antennae. One unique feature of Parachella is their developmental process. Unlike other tardigrades, their offspring do not go through a larval stage. In most tardigrades, newly hatched young are larvae, miniature versions of adults that lack fully developed reproductive organs and other structures. As they molt, they gradually develop these features. Parachella, however, bypass this stage entirely. Their eggs hatch into juveniles, which are essentially smaller copies of the adults. This developmental strategy has several advantages. It allows them to reach adulthood more quickly, reduces their risk of predation by skipping a vulnerable larval stage, and is more energy efficient, as it eliminates the need for a transitional phase before adulthood. Since it has come up, let's talk about how tardigrades reproduce. Most tardigrades use sexual reproduction. Males and females mate, and the female releases fertilized eggs into the environment, where they eventually hatch into young tardigrades. However, some tardigrades, especially those in the order Apochella, are capable of parthenogenesis, an asexual mode of reproduction. In this process, females can lay unfertilized eggs that develop into viable embryos. Tardigrades that can reproduce this way only do so when a mate is unavailable, allowing them to sustain or grow their population in environments where males are rare. There are both advantages and disadvantages to parthenogenesis. The primary benefit is that it enables rapid population growth in isolated environments. However, one of the key advantages of sexual reproduction is genetic diversity, which increases adaptability to changing environments. Parthenogenesis, on the other hand, produces offspring that are genetic clones of their mother, limiting the potential for adaptation. The specific type of parthenogenesis used by tardigrades is believed to be apomictic parthenogenesis, which results in genetically identical offspring. Other forms of parthenogenesis allow for some genetic variation, but current research suggests that tardigrades do not utilize these alternative methods. The primary drawback of reduced genetic diversity is a lower ability to adapt to environmental changes, making populations more susceptible to extinction. However, since tardigrades primarily reproduce sexually and only resort to parthenogenesis when necessary, they retain the genetic diversity needed for long-term survival. The different lineages of tardigrades give us insight into their diverse lifestyles. These microscopic creatures are found all over the world, in habitats as extreme as mountaintops, geothermal vents, and the deep ocean. Aside from the 62 species found exclusively in freshwater, all others are either marine or terrestrial. Because the earliest lineages diverged from marine ancestors, it's likely that tardigrades first evolved in the oceans before some species adapted for life on land. Most tardigrades live in damp microhabitats, on lichens, liverworts, mosses, or in soil and leaf litter. Those found in freshwater or marine environments typically live among the particles and vegetation at the bottom, although some species are parasitic, attaching to marine invertebrates. They are incredibly abundant. In soil, there can be up to 300,000 tardigrades per square metre, and in mosses that number can skyrocket to 2 million per square metre. Tardigrades are mainly predatory, feeding on other tardigrades, nematodes, or bacteria. Some, particularly those in the Apocella group, are detritivores, helping break down decaying plant matter. Others feed directly on mosses or plants, using their specialized mouthparts to pierce cell walls and absorb nutrients. They have a pair of sharp stylets that help them pierce their prey, and their salivary glands secrete digestive fluids, starting the breakdown of food before it's even ingested. Muscles in their pharynx then pump the food directly into their gut for further digestion. Tardigrades move more like arthropods than other soft-bodied invertebrates. Their muscles work in pairs to push each leg forward and backwards. Strong claws help grip the surface, which is why they often appear to clumsily crawl, one of the traits that has made them so endearing to people. Unlike vertebrates, tardigrades don't have lungs or gills. They rely on gas diffusion through their cuticle, the tough outer layer of their body. With an open circulatory system, they don't have veins or arteries. Gas diffuses directly across the cuticle and into their blood. Despite their simple anatomy, tardigrades show a surprising degree of learning ability. When threatened, they enter a defensive posture known as the ton state. In experiments, tardigrades have been shown to associate light with electric shocks and enter the ton state when exposed to light alone, even without the shock. This suggests they are capable of basic associative learning. Perhaps the most famous trait of tardigrades is their incredible resilience. They can survive harsh conditions that would destroy almost any other animal. However, it's important to note that tardigrades are not extremophiles that thrive in these extreme environments. Rather, they endure these conditions temporarily and will perish if exposed for too long. The key to their resilience lies in their ability to enter the ton state, a form of cryptobiosis. In this state, tardigrades shut down their metabolism, drying out and halting all cellular processes. Essentially, they enter a deep, dormant state and stop needing food or water. Some species can remain in this state for years or even decades and still be revived when conditions improve. The longest observed time in the ton state was over 30 years, though the longer they stay in this state, the harder it becomes for them to recover. This state allows them to endure extreme conditions. Tardigrades can survive temperatures as low as -272 degrees Celsius, which is close to absolute zero, and as high as 149 degrees Celsius or 300 Fahrenheit, but only for short periods. They are also highly resistant to desiccation, able to survive severe water loss by entering the ton state and rehydrating when water becomes available again. During their ton state, tardigrades can survive without oxygen, endure pressures as high as 600 megapascals, about 6 times the pressure at the bottom of the Mariana Trench, and thrive in zero-pressure environments. They are also remarkably resilient to radiation, able to survive levels that would be fatal to almost any other organism. In 2007, researchers took tardigrades into space and exposed them to the vacuum of space for 10 days. 68% of them survived and were able to reproduce afterward. Later studies showed that their survival was due to their ton state. Hydrated tardigrades had much lower survival rates. Some species have additional survival strategies. For example, Halobiotis crispae, a marine tardigrade, switches between a summer morph that reproduces and a winter morph that doesn't. The winter morph is highly resistant to freezing and low salinity, helping the tardigrade survive harsher conditions. While not a true ton state, this behavior is comparable to hibernation. Tardigrades can even survive impacts of up to 1200 Gs. To put that into perspective, 1 G is the force of gravity we experience on Earth. In a car crash, forces of 30 to 50 Gs are typical. Yet, tardigrades can survive forces 24 times higher than that, forces that would crush a human instantly. So, how do tardigrades survive such extremes? To understand this, we have to look at them on a genetic level. One of the key factors in tardigrades' resilience is a sugar called trehalose. This sugar is found in many desiccation-resistant organisms, and tardigrades have a high level of it. When animals lose water, the walls of their cells become damaged, proteins unfold, and DNA strands can break. In tardigrades, trehalose helps stabilize these cells and proteins, preventing much of this damage, and enables DNA repair mechanisms to continue functioning. However, trehalose alone can't explain the tardigrades' extreme survival abilities. When they desiccate, tardigrades produce a group of proteins known as intrinsically disordered proteins. These proteins have no defined 3D structure, and many of them appear to be unique to tardigrades. These proteins are likely responsible for their remarkable resilience. Additionally, tardigrades produce proteins that protect against cold shock, radiation damage, and help with general survivability. Unsurprisingly, these proteins are of great interest to scientists researching potential biomedical applications. They could potentially be used to develop treatments for radiation sickness, freezing, and other conditions where damage to cells is a concern. Tardigrades are living proof that survival can come in the most unexpected forms. Their adaptability to extreme environments makes them a subject of fascination and study, both in the scientific community and among curious minds everywhere. It's fascinating to see how these tiny, unassuming creatures have made their way into popular media. The first known instance dates back to 1908 in the short story Bathabia by Douglas Mawson. In it, a giant tardigrade bites a man's toe, putting him into a coma. Another tardigrade later scares the narrator awake, revealing that the entire adventure was just a dream. Spoilers, I suppose, but it's over a century old, so I think we're safe. Fast forward to the 2010s, and tardigrades have found even more spotlight. In 2015, the world saw the release of the Tardigrade song, in which the artist imagines himself as the creature. That same year, Harbinger Down hit theatres, where tardigrades are mutated into intelligent shape-shifting monsters. In 2017, Star Trek Discovery introduced a new alien threat, which was eerily similar to a massive tardigrade. Tardigrades have even made appearances in Marvel's Ant-Man movies and popular TV shows like Family Guy and South Park. Even children's media has embraced tardigrades. In 2019, My Tiny Pet, a picture book by Jesse Hartland, introduced young readers to these quirky creatures. And in 2012, Michael Hurst's Unusual Creatures, a non-fiction book aimed at kids, featured tardigrades among other bizarre animals. This surge in popularity likely comes from a mix of their alien-like appearance, remarkable resilience, and the clumsy and daring way they move. It's hard not to love a creature that looks like it's always stumbling through life. Thanks for watching. Tardigrades are an amazing group of animals, especially considering their ability to survive the most extreme environments. I also enjoyed diving into a less conventional group of animals, Not just the usual vertebrates and insects, but these tiny, resilient creatures that often go unnoticed. Thank you for listening, and let me know if there's another group of animals you'd like to see me cover in the comments.